Hi, I'm Larry Puckett, the DCC Guy. Well, today I'm back here at the benchwork at the transition from the Helix to the rest of the layout, and I'm going to be transferring the track plan from the printed version onto the sub roadbed. And then, after I've got the track plan transferred, I'm going to get my Surform tool out, this little guy right here, and I'm going to be cutting a gradient into the foam so that it's going to be a nice smooth transition from the Helix bridge onto the rest of the layout. So stick around and we'll get started. Hit that little red subscribe button, and when the little bell comes up, click on it and click all. Okay, we're here at the end of the layout where we're going to be making the transition from the 1% bridge up to the flat 0% slope here on the roadbed on the benchwork itself. So at this point, I'm going to have two transitions. We're going to have a gradual curve here into the straight section going out the rest of the way, and I'm going to have a gradient cut into the foam so that it transitions gradually from the 1% slope on the bridge to the perfectly flat level here on the rest of the benchwork. So I've taken my drawing that I printed out from CAD Rail, and I've taken measurements off of it. So I know it's 5 inches from the wall out to the first track here. It's 8.5 inches from the wall out to the first track here. So I transferred those onto the benchwork here, the foam, using my marker here, my Sharpie. And I've drawn a line at least this far, because in through this section, it's perfectly straight. But then it has to curve to meet the perfectly straight track coming up from the Helix. So I've got my little easement device here. It's an old piece of bamboo strip that gives me a nice gradual curve from one straight line into another. So all I've done is pin that in place. This is the straight line coming up from the Helix, and then there's a straight line coming here from the rest of the layout. So I'm going to just take my Sharpie and run a line along this to join them. And that's all there is to creating that easement. Let me take that apart. So you can see now I've got a very gradual curve here. It's just practically imperceptible coming out of that straight section on the bridge onto the straight section of the layout. Now the next thing I have to do is draw another one right next to it, because again, this is double track mainline. So what I'm doing is just putting a line here 2 inches in from the other line where the track is going to be laid. And that way I get my 2-inch separation between my tracks, which is pretty much what you'll expect, what you'll find on most model railroads and most design books. They'll show you 2 inches between the track centers here. And now I'm going to draw the straight section down through here, so I'll have something to connect to. Okay. And then I'm going to put my my bamboo strip back in place here so that we'll be able to shoot an easement that way. Okay, so that's got the second line set up. Now all I have to do is run my Sharpie along this strip of bamboo to connect the dots. And there we have the double track main line ready to be cut down. So the next thing, get out my Surform tool, and this is a Stanley Surform, S-U-R-F-O-R-M 21-399. And these, the last time I checked, these were still available. Okay, let's begin by cutting down to the plywood here. Getting it started can be a little difficult at first, but once you cut through the smooth surface, it does start cutting down. Okay, I'm going to stop and clean up a little bit before I get a big mess. Okay, I got things all cleaned up with my shop vac, so you can see I've already cut a pretty good little gully in here, and that's where my right-of-way is going to be laid, in between these lines. And then it'll give me a nice shallow gradient up through here. And as I make some progress, I'll come back and show you as I move backwards. Well, I think you can see that after just a very few minutes, I cut down to the level of the bridge itself, and I've got a nice gradient coming up out of that joint. So this is just the beginning. I've got to go back another couple of feet in order to give me the gradient or slope that I want, so we get a good smooth transition. And I'll just keep going at this, and then once I'm done, I'll show you. Well, as you can see now, I've been working on this for a while, so I've got it cut down quite a bit. So I've got a nice slope cut down to the level of the bridge itself, so it's a nice transition there. And then if we go on up, you can see I've gone back a full 4 feet here on the road bed, cutting it down. So that gives us a nice gradient. So I'll let you do the math. That's a 1/2 inch over 48 inches. So you're coming out close to 1%. Not quite, but close to it. So the next thing I'm going to do is, I've got my liquid nails for projects out there, as you can see, that green thing. And I'm going to be laying some cork road bed. So for the cork road bed, that's going to start right about here on the bridge. And I'm going to lay the cork, and then I'll come back with the Surform tool and cut an approach gradient in it as well. So we'll have the cork road bed going from the bridge up onto the pink foam sub-road bed, and then on up to where it meets the flat level back here at about 4 feet back. So let's get started with that. So as you can see here, I've already replaced the lines that I cut away. So we've got the outline for where the cork road bed needs to go. And I've already pre-marked locations here where I want to start laying the adhesive. So I'm going to do that first strip here. We'll take it right on down. Okay, that's got that first bead laid pretty well. So let me go ahead and get out the cork. And you'll note that I also extended the piece of cork up and over the point where we go from the sloped section out onto the flat. And that way it'll give it a gradual transition. And one thing that I will do is when this is good and dry and before I apply the Trek itself, I'm going to come back with my Surform tool, and I will give this a little bit of a shave down as well to make sure we get a real smooth fit there. Okay, I've got my roller, so let's roll that cork down. We can get it rolled out nice and smooth all the way down here and get a good bond started. There's a little bit that's squeezed out right in here, so let me get that out so I won't have to worry about it when it dries. And this rough area here that will form a ditch, that will probably be covered with something like Sculptamold in order to give it a much smoother appearance in here. Or it could be just some eroded sidewall of the ditch. Well, let's go ahead and run another bead down through here. Let me go ahead and make my little hatch marks here so I can see where the line is. And again, these are just so I can see the line through the adhesive. Okay, so that's ready to dry now. Let me go ahead and work on down onto the bridge itself. Okay, so we're at a point right here where we want to make sure we get a really good smooth transition between the foam sub-road bed here and the plywood here. So one of those critical points, make sure it's a good smooth transition, and then lay your cork road bed. And now I'm going to apply the cork, so let's get that laid down here. roll that smooth transition. Well, the adhesive has dried completely. Everything's good and firm. So at this point, I'm sanding down the final 20 inches or so of this section of the cork roadbed so that we get a nice gradient, a good change in slope from the bridge up to the cork so that the trains won't be challenged by the climb up this, this shallow gradient. So it's simply going to be a matter of sitting here and cutting down the final 20 inches. So that will give me a slope, somewhere less than 2% total for that particular section of the bridge. So the trains won't have any problem at all coming up from the Helix. So as you can see, this thing cuts the cork very well and gives you a nice finish here. I will probably go over with a sanding block on the final cut just to give it an even smoother area, but for the most part, it does a great job cutting. To be honest, I think it actually takes less time to cut down the cork than it did to take the foam down, because the foam, it chips and creates all kinds of little problems along the way that you have to stop and deal with. Whereas this, as you can see, just creates a bunch of cork grit. What I have found that works best in order to get a good smooth gradient is to use these long sweeping cuts like this, 10 inches or so at a time. And that way you're getting a good even cut through the cork. I'm going to continue cutting down on the cork here, giving it a nice smooth transition. And when I get done, then I'm going to be ready to lay the track and do the wiring, and that'll be it. Well, that's a wrap for today's video. As you can see, we've gotten a lot done in the last couple of weeks. Installed the bridge that connects the Helix to the rest of the layout. I've cut down the pink foam sub-road bed on the benchwork so that we've got a good gradient there. We've laid the cork road bed on top of the foam and also out onto the bridge and carried it on down well into the tunnel. And I've got it cut down to a nice gradient to match that on the foam. So we're going to have a fairly easy transition for trains coming up. So next week we will be proceeding with laying the track here, adding the wiring for it, and by the end of the day we'll be able to run a train from the hidden staging yard all the way up the Helix, across the bridge, and out onto the main layout. And then after that, I've got to start building a big bridge. So, until next week, have a great weekend, have a great week, and I'll see you then with another video from the DCC Guy. Bye now.